Well, good to have you with us here on the Sunday edition of the South African Morning. I'm Gareth Edwards. Also, a happy Father's Day to all of those who are celebrating their dads and the dads who are being celebrated. It's also World Refugee Day, and 23 years since the passing of the Refugee Act, asylum seekers in South Africa are continuing to experience infringements of very basic human rights. That's according to the Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. Let's find out just how bad it's actually been during COVID as well. I'm joined by COMSA Director. It is Mr. Thifulufheli Sinthumule joining us here on ENCA. Mr. Sinthumule, good morning to you. So at the best of times, we covered this extensively on ENCA, refugees on the outskirts, medical health support, police support, security support, getting passports, basic documents. Even before COVID-19, this was a big issue, wasn't it? How bad has it been the last year? Anything to celebrate?
Good morning to all your viewers out there, and thank you for having me. As you have rightfully indicated, today is the 20th of June. We commemorate and celebrate the World Refugee Day, which falls on each year, the 20th of June, to honor and raise awareness on the resilient courage and determination of millions of women, men, and children who are forced to flee under the threat of violence, conflict, and persecution, and leave everything behind from their place of origin or place of country where they were born. So as we mark and celebrate this World Refugee Day today, which is the 21st anniversary since the proclamation of the resolution that was passed by the United Nations back in the year 2000. So we are celebrating this day in the amid of a lot of social ills and quite a number of human rights violations that refugees and asylum seekers still faces in their host countries. Like you have rightfully indicated, the issues of access to documentations, which is the key issue in unlocking any access to basic human rights in any other countries. So before even lockdown and the regulations were imposed in the whole of South Africa and other countries as they were affected by the COVID-19, which continue to affect those countries, we see that refugees and asylum seekers still faces a big challenge in accessing the documentation, which is an asylum seeker permit, which is under the Refugee Act of Section 22 of that Act. And we still also see the denial of access to refugee permit, which is Section 24 of the Refugee Act, which then leads to a lot of exploitation, expose most of asylum seekers and refugees quite a number of challenges in the country.
And as far as government support during COVID-19, the attention obviously moving away from nearly everything else, some critics will say, because of COVID-19. Has the situation gotten even worse? What's the engagement been like with government? Or are migrants and refugees in South Africa even more forgotten and even more lost than they were before?
Yes, as I indicated previously, that even when we went to COVID, refugees and asylum seekers, including migrants, were already facing quite a number of challenges and human rights violation action that were taking place. So the COVID has just made it even worse in the fact that you will remember that when we went to the lockdown in March, quite a number of services within the Department of Home Affairs were suspended, especially through the refugee reception offices around the country. All services were suspended, which then led to quite a number of challenges, including the expiry of some of the refugee and asylum seeker permits. That expiry then poses quite a number of challenges in terms of refugees and asylum seekers in accessing key services such as access to banking. Some of their bank accounts were closed because their permit were expired. Some they could not access even healthcare service, which is a critical and life-saving service that people should be accessing, and including access to education and employment and so forth in terms of the UIF benefit. So hence even the grant, the COVID-19 unemployed grant, when it was introduced to only cater for the South African citizen. Luckily, through a court case that was done by one of our member organizations, Calabrini Center of Cape Town, we managed to win the case so that even refugees can be included, so that their livelihoods can be amended through the challenges that was posed by the COVID-19.
Thifulufheli, speak to me about what government can try and do now. It is World Refugee Day. The focus is going to be on refugees here in South Africa. What are you hoping government can actually do? Clearly not much has changed since the Act came into being 23 years ago. If government is listening now, give them the one thing that your organization needs from today going forward.
The one thing that we would like the government of South Africa, especially through the Department of Home Affairs, who are the custodian of the refugees and all migrants who are within the country, is to address all the challenges that are faced by refugees and asylum seekers through making it a possibility that all asylum seekers and refugees and economic migrants, they are having access to the enabling document, which will then protect them from arrest, deportation, and denial of access to basic services. Because without documentation, their lives becomes even harder to access quite a number of issues, because you will know that for you to access even education, for you to even have livelihood, for you to even have access to medical care, you need proper documentation. So we are calling upon the Department of Home Affairs and other relevant departments that are within the government of South Africa to say, can you be able to verify and enable refugees and asylum seekers to have equal protection and access to all basic human rights as like anyone who are living within the South African borders, and to also call upon all the citizens of South Africa and across the globe to refrain and discourage all social ills such as discrimination, xenophobia, and all social exclusion that are directed to asylum seekers and refugees, because quite a number of them, they are here seeking refuge and protection from their own government that they are fearing persecution back home. So they are here to say, can you please protect us from our own government? And we are a human being like anyone else. Our blood is red and your blood is red. We are all human beings.
Well, hopefully government and South African society at large is listening to our conversation this morning on World Refugee Day. Thank you, Thifulufheli Sinthumule, joining us here on ENC, Consortium for Refugees and also Migrants Director here on the South African Morning. Let's not forget just how difficult it must be if you have access to no paperwork. Imagine not being able to do anything, healthcare, education, safety. Just imagine the plight of refugees in South Africa. Give it a thought, this Refugee Day here in South Africa.